Merry Christmas to me! My Jazza box came in! I'm going to apologize right at the start of this video because I didn't think I was getting this in time to make a video. So I hadn't planned on a video for it today at all, but voila! If you follow me on Twitter, you'll have seen that I got it already, but this is the video where I open it up and experiment with all this stuff. Since I've had to film, voice, and edit this in less than 24 hours, it's not going to be a well-polished video. It's honestly just a sped up video with a rambly voiceover, so sorry about that. When I saw that Jazza was making a new set of art boxes, I knew that I had to get one. Since the other two boxes he made were more 3D art based and cost altogether almost $400, I decided I would go the safe route and only get the ink based box for $100. It still emptied my bank account because I've been out of a job since January, but hey, new art supplies. I was so excited when he decided to include another Hahnemuhle sketchbook in this box. I still have the one from his first box, which I'm going to finally start using since I just finished my other sketchbook, and I'm super impressed with the quality. It's also tan-toned paper, which I love using. I have a Strathmore tan-toned sketchbook too, but the green is rather large and distracting, whereas the tone in the Hahnemuhle is much more uniform, and I'm excited to play around with it. I'll be saying I'm excited a lot in this video, so I suppose another apology is in order for that as well, but too bad, because I'm not sorry. I've watched a couple other YouTubers open these boxes already, so I have a fair idea of how to use everything in here, which is probably a smart thing, because after I emptied this box, I realized that it didn't come with a pamphlet describing anything that came in it. I thought Jazza had mentioned that when these were being shipped that they would come with like an instructional booklet or something. But, oh well, today's meant to be an experiment, so I'm gonna figure it out. The metallic calligraphy ink pigments all look super pretty. I was sort of the most worried about those simply because I was scared about mixing it wrong or mixing it too much. And that's especially a concern when I only have a limited amount of the binding agent, but they're meant to be used. That's what I have to keep telling myself in this video. I didn't buy it all just to look pretty. I mean, I sort of did, but I also bought them to use them. I swear. The watercolor inks also look really cool. I think they're the only thing I didn't use in this video, at least not extensively, but since I'm getting more into watercolors, I'm really excited to see how watercolor ink compares. They look so bright. The alcohol inks thankfully seemed intact. I'm not exactly sure how these are meant to be used. I remember seeing several people use them in paint pouring type art pieces, but that's about it. I do try that myself towards the end of the video, so make sure to stick around for that. Then, the best for last. If there was anything I was the most excited for, it was definitely this. I've been wanting to try a proper dip pen with ink for ages, and I'm so happy that the ink didn't explode or anything. I was worried since I live pretty out there in the cold northern wilds, and a lot of stuff that gets delivered out here often fails to hold up to the elements. That being said, our weather recently has been super mild and not very cold yet, which is very odd considering we usually have snow from October, November to April or May, most of the year. But right now it's just all rainy and gloomy outside, so But not in here with all the goodies. I took my time familiarizing myself with the shape of the pen and the nibs, and I definitely don't think I'm going to be able to use it left-handed. It felt fine in my left hand, but considering the ink is probably slow drying and susceptible to smearing, I'll stick to being right-handed while using this. I'm not sure if the differences in nib designs change the flow of the ink, but when I got to the third one, I knew I had to finally just dip it into the ink and try it out. But considering the ink barrel is black, I had a hard time figuring out when I had dipped the pen far enough and had to dip in a lot before I finally decided to just dunk the whole thing in there. It seemed like the ink was just sort of slicking right off the nib, so I don't know if they have a special coating on them or anything, but I eventually got enough ink on there and was able to write with it. I had no idea how it was going to feel to write with this because everything I've ever seen about them has told me that they would be scratchy if you didn't use it properly. But when I started writing with this, it felt super smooth. I don't know if that's supposed to be the experience with every dip pen, but with this one it was. And I didn't have to re-dip the pen at all. I had extra ink, in fact. I ended up having to wipe it off because I didn't know what else to do with it, and I didn't want to try and dive into a full illustration just yet. I also had a lot of pre-Christmas stuff to attend to and didn't really have time to film a video to start with, so yeah. Like I said earlier, there will be more videos using this stuff that isn't all very rushed voiceover. The funniest nib was definitely the pointer finger one, and my favorite one was the cool sword-looking one right next to it. The others were also nice, though the last one was bent at the edge. The other nibs didn't seem to have a bend like this, so I don't know if this one is supposed to be designed like that on purpose or something happened to it. Everything in the box was held tight in place, so I assume that it's designed like that. I'll have to use it at some point to test it out, but otherwise, everything looks good. Having gone through all the nibs, I thought I would test out the watercolor ink, thinking it would work in a similar way with the dip pen, and I sort of got it to work. But I'm pretty sure that the watercolor ink is not meant to be used with the dip pen. It was interesting to at least give it a try though. Then I opened all of the alcohol inks, which I was not prepared for. They required being poked with a thumbtack, which I had on hand, but I didn't think about the fact that the bottles were pressurized and would probably leak out when I pierced the nozzle. Needless to say, I have very colorful fingers now. I mean, as of recording the audio, my hands are finally clean, so it's not like they're permanently staining or anything. But I did get cool looking colors on my fingers. It's not art if I don't make a mess of it. After that, I decided to mess around with the pigments. On the box that it came in, it said to mix in 1 teaspoon of each pigment and water, and 1/4 teaspoon of the gum arabic. And I followed that recipe with some ceramic measuring spoons I stole from the kitchen. Don't tell anyone. I promise I cleaned and disinfected them afterwards so that they were safe again. Probably. But the problem with following that recipe is, well, that it makes way too much. With this first rose color, it actually seemed a little thick to me. I ended up transferring some of it that was on the paintbrush over to some clean water in a different well, and it diluted it to the point that it felt more like watercolor than it did ink. I took out a watercolor postcard and decided to try and make a gradient until I realized that I hadn't mixed the other color yet. With the second color, I didn't follow the recipe. I kind of just eyed it instead, and maybe you can't see it, but it did come out a little chunky. So I tried adding a little more gum arabic, and I think that worked. It was definitely more watery than the first color, but I was able to build up the pigment while it was still wet on the postcard. It also re-wet the other color and allowed for fairly easy mixing. That does mean that layering with these isn't going to work super well though, so that's something to remember. And while I set that to dry, I decided to take out the calligraphy chisel nibs and the graph paper notebook and try it out. This was actually a lot of fun because I got to write some things in Tengwar. I've been slowly learning their alphabet system because, well, I guess I don't really have a reason. I like learning languages, and while I'm not actually learning Elvish, learning the script is just as fun. I use it to write the word silver, as well as several of my characters' names that I haven't fully fleshed out yet, but you'll see them eventually. The one thing I'm not used to yet with these is that you have to hold it at a certain angle and pretty much straight down because, unlike other chisel nibs, these ones are straight. Usually, chisel nibs have a slit to them, but these don't. So I ended up with patchy lines in a couple places. I'm not a calligraphy person, but honestly, I think I just might take up the hobby now with this stuff. I attempted to write some in Japanese, but my Japanese is super rusty, and I don't know how to do Japanese calligraphy, so please go easy on me about it. It's been a few years since I've actually worked with the language. I also tried applying what I knew about brush lettering, and it sorta worked. I have a couple different fonts when I write with my right hand, and often when I'm using something new, the fonts tend to collide. As you can see, I try to make it cursive, but it's not exactly good. It's decent for someone who's never done calligraphy. Though I must say, with my normal handwriting, it does manage to look alright. Another thing to note was that though the pages are relatively thin, the ink doesn't necessarily bleed through to the other page. It did slightly bleed onto the back, but otherwise the paper held up really well. I'm impressed and definitely will be using this a lot more than I thought. Having experimented with those, I checked to see if the postcard was dry yet, but it was not. So I moved on to exploring the alcohol inks and the Dura-Bright paper. It was basically photo paper. It had almost the same sort of glossy smoothness to it as photo paper does. It said on the card that it was meant for the exact stuff that was in this box as well as regular watercolors, so I'm interested to see how that would work. It's not absorbent by design, so I'm imagining that drying times and layering would be altered significantly with this paper. It also mentioned on the paper that you could scratch or indent the surface to create texture for the watercolor or ink to flow into or around, so I started by taking the back of my paintbrush and roughly scratching in a simple smiley face. And though from this angle the light shines on it, I did bring it closer to give you all a better look, and it looks really cute. I attempted to paint with the alcohol ink using the brush, but the alcohol ink dries so quickly that thinning it out pretty much only works for a few seconds and leaves you with a stained brush. Oops. I was able to wash it out later though. I just probably shouldn't use brushes with these. I do anyway, but that's besides the point. Art doesn't have rules. But if you don't want stained brushes, don't do what I did. I played around with layering the glitter pigment on top of the dried alcohol ink, as well as on top of the ink when it was still wet, and honestly, I was kind of surprised that it sort of worked. It looked like I had dropped little galaxies into a new universe. Then of course I had to mess it up and then attempt to fix it by messing it up more before giving it up to let it dry and attempt it again. You'll see that once more in this video too. In fact, just realizing this now, I put the two mess-ups next to each other when editing, so way to go, Heather, on that one. I tried to make the postcard usable by doodling on it, but then I realized it looked like trash, so I tried to cover it up. But the ink pen I used, which wasn't one from the box, hadn't completely dried, so it smeared into the pigment I was laying on top, which made the entire thing gray. But it was opaque enough that I could pretty much cover it, so it wasn't a total loss. I still need to figure out what to do with it though, so I mean, it might just be a lost cause after all. But as the last project for the video, I tried to seriously do an abstract design with all the alcohol inks. Since they dried so fast, it was hard to get them to flow far after a couple of seconds, but I kept playing with the colors and ended up mixing a lot of new colors that looked super cool. So it was totally worth it in the end. Just watch. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. I'm honestly so happy with everything in this box and I can't wait to use more of it. I promise I'll have more well put together videos using this stuff in other projects, but I was just so excited that this came in earlier than expected and I had to tear into it. I'll list out all the stuff that came in this box in the description below in case you had any questions. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, as rushed and rambly as it is, you can give it a like or leave a comment below telling me what interests you the most about this box. I upload content every Tuesday and Friday, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see more of my stuff. I hope you all are doing well. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.